And then one night I found myself on this roof on my own, standing over the edge and looking down at the ground. I kind of thought to myself, holy shit, my mom and Glenn are going to have to come and scrape my body off the ground. And so I decided to make it to my sister's wedding and say goodbye to everybody that way. I didn't jump off the building that night, man, but I can tell you, I was trying to kill myself with alcohol and it was working.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurs of Recovery podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Harless. This is a podcast where we explore the world of entrepreneurship, of resilience, of recovery, and the healing potential of psychedelics. If this is your first time tuning into the show, welcome. If you would take a moment to like and subscribe to the show on YouTube or leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, that'd be extremely helpful because that helps more people to reach the show. That helps my show to pop up on people's Spotify. And it also helps to get these great guests that I have coming on that are asking to be on the show. So thank you all for doing that. Thank you all for your love and support over the last 73 episodes. I'm really excited for that. I'm also really excited for the work that I'm doing right now called Psychedelic Curation Experience or the Psychedelic Concierge. If you want to learn more about my services, what I'm offering, go to jesseharless.com. You can learn more about what I'm up to in the world. And I'm about to revamp the entire website to get much more clear, but check it out and reach out to me if you have any questions. So today, I'm really excited. Our guest today is Keegan Downer, and he is the founder of Mindful Meds. And in this episode, like many of my guests, he became very vulnerable and shared his story of addiction and even suicidal ideation at times, and even how it led to many of these struggles that happen, these health struggles like type 1 diabetes as a result of his alcoholism. And that journey led to his inspiring journey of holistic health and starting this company, Mindful Meds. And we get into all different types of topics. We get into a comprehensive study he did utilizing psilocybin. He also talked about his own microdosing guide that was created, and it's a very comprehensive guide. So I really recommend that you check out this episode. And this is an episode that I think is going to be really helpful for many folks who are looking to explore this world and also just looking for some free resources to learn about the world of microdosing. So enjoy. Hey, Keegan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Grateful to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a long time coming. We met recently, but I feel like we've known each other a long time. And I'm really excited to get your story shared to this audience and especially the work you're doing today. But let's get right into it. And I would love to let the audience know a little bit about you. And we just were talking about Costa Rica a little bit too. So let's just get right into your life, your story. And I know you have a story of addiction too. And that was a big influence in your story of why you started the company you run today. And I'm really excited to learn more about your company and, just get right into it. So welcome. And I'd like to get to know Keegan a little bit better.
Thank you, man. Super grateful to be here. This seems so in alignment to, the trajectory of, my path. And I'm kind of new to your community, but a couple weeks ago, we got on a call together and started unpacking a few things, and there was definitely a connection. And so, really grateful to come and share a bit of my story. I guess, like all of our stories, it starts in childhood. And, I had a really interesting childhood. When my parents divorced, my dad moved back from where I am today, from Calgary to the UK. And I was about 6 years old when he did that. I remember actually visiting him for the weekend and him saying, hey, I'm moving back to the UK, and just being devastated, right? Like not understanding that your dad's not going to be there anymore. And his theory of it was, well, we'll get to spend every summer together. And so from the time that I was at the end of grade 2 until I was 19 years old, I spent every single summer with my dad. And it was interesting because there was so much structure in my life with my mom and my stepdad, Glenn, family dinners on the table. And then we'd get shipped off to England every summer, my sister and I. And there was no rules, man. Like it was anything goes. Eat what you want, play with what you want, swear, all these things that my mom was, I'm sure every time we came home, it was like unraveling all the hard work that my mom had done. But yeah, my dad was an amazing guy. He was an incredible human being. His story was he ran away from home at 14 years old. He's Irish. So on that side of my family tree, there's just generation upon generation upon generation of men that just absolutely hate themselves. And they numb themselves with alcohol. And so, yeah, my dad actually had his master's in psychology. And what he was doing was building social programs for the underdog in the 1990s in the UK. And by underdog, I mean people with addiction, people with homelessness, mental illness. This is back in the 1990s when really no one's talking about this. It was just so taboo. It was just not really something that people knew a lot about. So that's a bit of it. I never wanted to be like my father. He was a nighttime drinker, not a daytime drinker. So he worked really hard during the day, and then in the evenings would quote unquote secretly drink. And of course, as kids, we knew exactly what was going on. And it was tough because anybody that's grown up with an addict parent, it's tough to watch. It's tough to go through. He had his own mental illness battles that he was struggling with. And honestly, man, I had a lot of anger in my system as a kid because I just never wanted to be like my dad. And I vowed to never be like my dad. And, my path with addiction, it started when I was 23. So I was in my third year of university. And yeah, I went through kind of like the biggest pocket of adversity of my life. And it's what felt good for me at the time was to numb my feelings with alcohol. And wildly, very, very quickly, I was addicted to booze. So within a matter of months, this thing went from being a weekend drinker, many people in university, to drinking a little bit in the evenings just to fall asleep. And then next thing you know, you're hanging out with the wrong people and your life is kind of spinning out. So yeah, that's how it kind of started, brother.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being so vulnerable, talking about your dad and what that relationship is like. Cause a lot of times, like you said, the anger, right? There's buried real rage and anger, I'm sure, from that relationship with the masculine and with your father. And, like you, I've experienced similar, and many men who I know who have that relationship estranged with their father. It's usually a really big wound that leads to a lot of the self-sabotaging behaviors. So yeah, it's kind of, it's not a surprise that happened, because 23, I was 22 when I blew everything up in my life. So I feel that age is could be a really self-destructive age for many men and women, but yeah, especially. Yeah, especially
was there a moment? Can you circle it back to pinpoint where it all started for you? I'm just very curious about. Yeah,
it's similar. I mean, it's similar. It started, the father wound, 3 years old. My dad left, and then the wound began because there was no opportunity to communicate with them, even though there was, and that was where the damage was. And then that went on for 17 years. So it was really. Like a complex PTSD type of over getting hit. Why doesn't my dad reach out to me? Why doesn't my mom advocate to see my dad? It was a real challenging, something I could only really feel those feelings in my 40s. I couldn't even process how deep that was until I could really get into these deeper layers with, your company has medicine and when I started getting to the medicine, I started to find the very buried rage and the anger towards, my parents. And my dad died of alcoholism when I was 20. So didn't have the relationship, and that happened. So I can relate to the father wound and having that and how that can develop, and then develop into the the person you are today, right? Because of that, we're going to get into the next part of your story, which is where you started to find some recovery, right?
Mm-hmm. Wow, man. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, so to maybe fast forward a little bit, like I don't often share this side of the story, but like, I'll tell you, man, like I was on top of the world before this started. And the time frame between like grade 8 till 2 years after high school was the best pocket of time in my entire life. I was just the guy that woke up happy. I could walk into the room and smile and be genuine and connect with people and want to be there. You know what I mean? And, I was a bit of an athlete. Had a lot going on for me on that side of things too. And then, so there's that side of it, right? Like I wouldn't have traded my life with absolutely anybody until the addiction started. And then I would have traded my life with anybody again in a different way. And so I had a job opportunity in New York City in 2008. And so when this all happened, when my life kind of just started to bottom out, was halfway between the year. I got hired the previous summer to go do this job in New York. Halfway through that year, I started drinking. And then I showed up in New York and I was a completely and utterly different version of myself. And I'll never forget taking the flight to New York. I was looking at the back of all these heads and just thinking, oh my God, I would do anything to trade my life with anybody here, anybody. Because I was just so depressed, man. It happened so freaking quickly to the point where I wanted to die. And I actually made a commitment that I was not going to come home from New York City. So the whole time in New York, I'm thinking, okay, how can I kill myself? And, still at the phase of the addiction where I could mask it well, in the sense like I would hide my feelings with humor. I would pretend like everything was okay. But really deep down inside, I was really just looking. I was looking for help. I had no idea how to ask for help. I was around the wrong people because everybody was drinking in New York that summer. And so the addiction kind of fit in with the addiction, right? I kind of hid because everybody else was drinking too. But ultimately I ended up on the rooftop of this building that we were staying in. And I'd been up there before to celebrate, big sales days. We'd go up and smoke cigars and drink champagne. And then one night I found myself on this roof on my own. And, standing over the edge and looking down at the ground, and I could literally see it right now. There was a garbage strike in New York City that summer, and it was just loaded with garbage, dude. And my parents, my mom and my stepdad, who's been a huge part of my life, they've been together for 36 years. They were on a trip around the world. And I kind of thought to myself, holy shit, my mom and Glenn are going to have to come and scrape my body off the ground. And so I decided to make it to my sister's wedding and say goodbye to everybody that way. And so I got home from New York. I remember walking through the airport in Calgary, which is where I'm talking to you now. And dude, I'm 23 years old and I'm walking through the airport. My hand is shaking like a leaf. Like the addiction had already, within 7-8 months, I was physically dependent on alcohol. And I just remember having to reach for my passport. I hadn't had a drink in about 6 hours because of the flight. And I was going through withdrawal and reaching for my passport and handing it to the passport agent and shaking. And that person looking at me like, holy shit, what is wrong with this kid? At this stage, none of my family knew, right? Like everybody thought I was that guy that was hired, the summer before, that was just kind of on top of the world. And so I wanted to share that, right? Like it's, wildly, the night of my sister's wedding is when I met my wife. And it took us a few years before we started dating. But we started dating, 4 or 5 years later. And she was with me for the start of my active addiction. It hadn't quite taken off to the place where I was not functioning. But yeah, man, fast forward to 2016. So that was 2008. 8-9 years later, I'm the first guy at the liquor store at 9 o'clock in the morning every day. I'm the last guy at the liquor store at 11 o'clock every day. And, I didn't jump off the building that night, man, but I can tell you, I was trying to kill myself with alcohol and it was working. I got, there's a moment that really just kind of saved my life. I mean, I was losing feeling between my arms and my legs, and I thought I had a terminal illness. Turns out my pancreas was no longer producing insulin, and I became a type 1 diabetic and was hospitalized. And, that hospitalization put some things into perspective for me, man. It was the first time that my parents had really clued in. I was doing a really good job at just having enough alcohol without being intoxicated at the family events. And really just going into just extreme, I was hiding. Like I was not the same version of myself, but it was the first time that they had realized, holy shit, our son's about to die and he needs help. And yeah, man, it was that moment actually where I maybe had a similar moment where it's just like, for me, it was being in the hospital bed, and I started to replay what it was going to look like at my funeral, who was going to be there, what was said about my life. And that young guy as a 20-year-old that loved himself to all of a sudden I'm the guy in the hospital, being the first guy at the liquor store, hating myself. I didn't like the conversation that I was playing through my head about my funeral. So very shortly after that, I got into rehab. And honestly, man, I remember just how terrified I was going into rehab. For anybody listening to this, I totally understand how scary that might be, but it turned out to be the best thing ever for me, man, because I walked in those doors. It took me a few days to warm up to everybody, but I realized right away, holy shit, this isn't what I thought rehab was. It was just this group of really talented people that were superstars in their own lanes, of what they do. There were CEOs, there was professional athletes, there was everyday people, but like me. But it was just not what I expected. I kind of expected everybody just to be hanging on for dear life, but it wasn't that. And so, yeah, can you relate to any of that, brother?
Yeah, well, I never went to rehab, but I can definitely relate to the people that I expected to be around. And I thought for sure it was going to be people who were under the bridge, drinking under the brown bag, shooting heroin, all these things. But the reality was many of the people I met were entrepreneurs. They had huge successful businesses that they had, had for decades, some of them, and lost. So yeah, I was blown away when I got into the first recovery community I was getting into, and like how talented and how many entrepreneurs there were. So yeah, I mean, same thing. I was really blown away, especially in my early 20s. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, man, like here's what happened for me. I go into rehab and I didn't come from money. So my parents actually paid for me to go. Like all addicts, you're not expected to live. So you're going, all the money you have is generally going into your substance. And so grateful that my mom and dad decided to send me here. I've since paid them back for the rehab experience. But my point is that I never thought I'd get another chance to go into a facility like this. So I gave it everything I had. And everything that I had was like throwing darts at the wall, trying to figure out, reverse engineering how the hell you ended up there. And amazingly, this rehab facility was it's state of the art in the sense that it was all based around mindfulness. So it's like yoga, breath work, meditation, beautiful food, Mother Nature, lots of walks, lots of sun, and of course, really comprehensive therapy. And so as you're telling your story and really unraveling all the secrets that you've been holding on to, all those painful little pieces of you that you didn't want the world to see. And all of a sudden, for the first time ever, you're starting to share this with people. And then you're starting to see the others open up. And slowly, we're all kind of unraveling how we got there. You really connect with these people, man. Like I was in there for 28 days, and I'll tell you, spending 16 hours a day with these people, by the end of it, at least in my situation, I was more connected to this group of people than I had been with my family for years. They knew things about me that I had never shared with anybody. And I'll never forget this is a great segue to get to the work that I'm doing today and why I'm doing the work that I'm doing today. But there was one moment that shifted everything for me. And it was the very last day in rehab. We got asked to basically go in this big circle. I think there was about 30 of us in there. And we're all sitting in this circle, and the director of the facility comes into the middle of the circle and starts looking at all of us. And she says, "Look to the person to your left." And so we all kind of turn our necks and we're looking to the person to the left, and we're staring at that person in the eyes. And you think you're getting a fucking pat on the ass to go back into the world. But the truth is she goes, "That person is dead in the next 365 days or less." And man, did that ever hit all of us in the heart. All of a sudden you've got 30 people crying instantly. And it just was not what you were expecting to hear. And then she goes, "Look to the person to the right." And we all look to the right, and she goes, "That person's back in one of these facilities in less than 365 days. And I thought, there's just no way. There's just no way this can be true. And in that moment, I realized, okay, I'm going to do everything that I possibly can to take my skills, to take my story and figure out how to make a difference to those numbers. And I had no idea what that was going to look like, man. Because I had no money. I walked out of rehab with $28 in my checkings account, $70,000 in debt, 10 years of unpaid taxes. I was on my way out. So how am I going to go and impact the world when I've got the biggest comeback ever to make? But I was inspired, and I left, and I started to really listen to some amazing content. I found some people online that I just love to listen to. And I started to rebuild a business that was just hanging on for the skin of its teeth. And within a year, I had rebuilt this company to a place where it was fruitful again, and the money was starting to come in. My confidence was starting to come in. And then a phone call came, and it was, I don't want to say a friend, but it was somebody in rehab that called me. And you kind of lose touch with everybody. You think you're going to stay connected, and in my situation, you didn't really stay in touch. And apparently that's actually quite common. But this phone call really fast-tracked, this idea of how am I going to serve this community? Because in this call, there were 7 people that I was in rehab with that had already died. And it was a number of overdoses. There was a suicide, and there was a murder, and there was a missing person. And I just thought, holy shit. And the one friend of mine that I was the closest to in there, she was one of them that overdosed, and she actually overdosed on my birthday. And so, yeah, man, that was something that really changed my life, was hearing those numbers.
Yeah, man, it's a tragedy, right? To hear that, the reality, and especially around the circle when that was said, and then to have to receive such a message. A lot of people might hear that and say, "Oh my God, that's so negative. That's so this," but it's the statistics of people making it. This in this day and age, because we're in a whole new day and age of, fentanyl and so many things that are here that weren't there before. And yeah, what a thing to hear. And then I'm really curious to hear what happened after that, hearing about, the people 7 people and what happened to them. And, there's probably 30 in your group, maybe.
Yeah.
And you get,
yeah, man. I mean, it's, I was floored. I just could not believe that you could go through a rehab facility like that, and the odds of actually coming out on top or staying sober, just how skinny those odds really are. I don't know what the global stats are, but I'd love to know. From my understanding, it's less than 3% of people that go into a rehab facility are ever sober, even a decade later. But yeah, man, my thought was, because I was so far behind, at least in my mind, I was so far behind the rest of the world at 31 years old, 32 years old at this point. My whole prerogative was, how can I make money? And then if I can make money, I can send someone to rehab, or I can help somebody. And so, a big opportunity fell into my lap. sounded very exciting. It was so far out of my zone of genius. I was very unqualified for this opportunity when it came up, but huge opportunity nonetheless. And it shifted my life. And I went into it for about 3 years. And the first year of running this business was very successful. It started to go to the moon. There was massive amounts of opportunity, and it looked very fruitful. And then it didn't. It started to shift. And all of a sudden I started to get, horrendous anxiety going to work, man. This is all the way leading up to 2019. And at this point I hadn't had a drink in about 3.5 years. And I was really close to a relapse. I remember calling my family, my parents and my wife, and saying, guys, I don't think I'm going to make it. And so I realized I had to get away from that business, and that was kind of difficult. But at that time, because my anxiety was so bad, I was looking for some tools to help me stay off the alcohol. And wildly, I got introduced very shortly after this to a mushroom farmer, a mycologist. And this guy started to show up in my life, and I was really intrigued because he was somebody that really didn't have a lot. He was living in a trailer with his dog. He had lost a business and gone through a nasty divorce, all these things. But yet this guy had this kind of glow to him that I was really interested in, and I was interested in learning from him. And honestly, man, he gave me some mushrooms in 2019. I went to Walmart, bought a little tiny 100 unit pill press, chopped up some psilocybin and started to measure out some 100 milligram microdosing capsules. And, this is 2019 in Calgary. This conversation was not happening at that point in time. It was quite taboo. I remember getting really excited about it and sharing about it with people, and just people thought I was absolutely insane that I was going to get into this. But I ended up having this incredible experience, and I'll never forget it because it shifted everything for me. And there was there wasn't a lot of science. There wasn't a lot of data, based on microdosing at the time. And so I just remember waiting and taking these microdoses and waiting for my moment that my life was changed. And it did show up in the most interesting way. I remember on the 13th day, writing in a journal, which was actually quite unique to me. I'd never really written in a journal before. And I remember writing a 3-page letter to my business partners from the previous business. And as soon as I penned it, I put the pen down and I actually texted my former CEO and said, hey, can I get you on a call for 5 minutes? Got on the call. And I literally read line for line everything that I wanted to tell my 2 partners. And I ended up getting the exact exit that I was looking for. I've never spoken to either one of these 2 ever again for the rest of my life. And that was part of the strategy. And I realized, holy shit, my brain is working completely differently. I have just problem solved in a way that I had never problem solved before. And I had been in sales for most of my career. And I can tell you, I had never written down a phone call in my entire life. Even when I get onto these, man, there's nothing written on this page. So that's what kind of opened the door for me to get curious if this was going to be, if I could have that type of a result so quickly, what would it be like for other people? I had this curiosity, would this work for other people? And I had this excitement thinking, oh my God, I am uncovering something incredible here. I'd never felt it in my heart. I'd never been more excited. And I later found out that I was, in the beginning phases of unlocking my purpose. And I had never felt what that was like before, man. I had no idea why I was still here on the planet. And then all of a sudden it was just this is why. So we ended up putting on the first ever microdosing study that has ever been done in Canada. We had 40 participants that signed up within 24 hours, very shortly after this experience that I just shared. And the idea of it was people would come in. The one caveat is they had never been able to microdose previous to this. So brand new to mushrooms. And they filled out a 13-question questionnaire, multiple choice question. And we at that point had a kind of a baseline evaluation as to how people were doing with their mental health and their mood and their stability levels. And then I provided the same medicine that I had taken for 40 people. And we got into a Slack group because it was just the start of COVID. I was originally on that Friday going to do this massive presentation. And Friday's when the world shut down. What's that?
Is this before you started the business that you have today?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
This is how it all started, man. Yeah. Wow. So the results were outstanding, dude. This group of people came in, and then we took the same questionnaire at the end of it 42 days later, and they filled out the exact same questionnaire. And then I hired a company to tally the data as to how the needle moved in these people's lives. And it was enough to make your jaw hit the floor. It was like, this can't even be real. The results were so outstanding that people's lives were shifting right in front of me. And it was just the most incredible thing to witness. So that's how Mindful Meds was born. I knew this was going to be a ride. I knew this is going to be extraordinarily challenging. Every business is extraordinarily challenging, but I was starting to walk into something that I had never done before, right? I had never done anything in the quote unquote gray market. And I knew it was going to be, super hard, but I had the ammo and the fire in my belly because of the results of the study to start moving this forward.
Yeah, so, we'll link in the show notes the link to the study because I know the study is available on your website. So It's really fascinating because a lot of this needle moving for psilocybin is, it's studies, right? It's things that can be published. And you did a study early on for 7 weeks and saw yourself, which is really incredible. It's like being a scientist yourself to be like, hey, this worked for me after 13, doses or whatever. And then you have this study that you publish, which, like I said, we'll share. And then now you had your own data to then say, you know what, let me start a company that is going to continue to replicate what I'm already seeing. So, and then this is the birth of Mindful Meds, which I love that name, Mindful Meds. I mean, that's really, really a great name. So let's hear about how this came to be.
Yeah, sure, man. I mean, it's, we started out doing the study, and then it was like looking at what was available in the industry for mushrooms at the time. And it was very gray market. Like if you were on one of those websites, you'd think, oh, I don't know if this is real. And so
it's not even legal, right? It's not even legal yet. It's not even legal yet either, right?
Not even legal yet. There's very few places that you can buy it. And to be honest with you, a lot of the places that you could seem super sketchy in to the point where, I wouldn't have placed an order. And I think the average person would be a little apprehensive. And so I started to see some opportunities there. It was like, how can we lead this industry in a way that we bring the safest product, the most consistent product, and the highest vibrational frequency medicine to the world? It was a freaking, it sounds very easy, but the truth is, man, is we've tried to do things completely differently here from the beginning. But those three things are where we really put our focus in. It's safety, consistency, vibrational frequency. And so, fast forward to, 4.5 years later, we have helped thousands of people safely come off SSRIs, antidepressants, and, those types of medicines. So that's been a huge part of the work that we do here. And then we started to design products.
Can I ask a question about that? Can I ask a question
absolutely.
about it? Because that's a big, big question.
Yeah.
So what have you found where people are already on SSRIs and they start to microdose psilocybin? What have you found in your research? Do people have less success if they're on SSRIs, or what is the research has shown you with SSRIs and microdosing?
Yeah, good question, man. And thank you for asking. So SSRIs in general really were not designed for you to ever come off, right? So once you start them, it is very, very difficult to come off. You're basically a customer forever. And so what they're really good at is, whatever the reason is that brought you to getting on the SSRI, maybe some challenges, there's some turbulence in your life, it's really good at numbing that out, right? So it stuffs it down and it puts it in that dark place under your ribs or wherever the hell it hides. And people try to start getting off of these things, and all of a sudden those emotions that they have been stored and all the things that they've been running from slowly start to come to the surface. And it's really challenging for people to process. And so, you kind of get hooked in this loop of on these meds. I can't tell you how many people, dude, that I've talked to, Jesse, that got onto these when they were in high school, and 20, 25, 30 years later, they're still on these. So there's that piece of it. Now, luckily, I was able to consult with, at the time, one of the top, one of the top psychiatrists in the space of psychedelics. So there's a massive clinic here in Calgary, one of the biggest in Canada, and he was working for them. And I got on a few calls with him to try to understand this before I've always just really wanted to understand this to make sure that we can make this as safe as possible for people. And so the first thing that he taught me was, 50% of people that come off of these SSRIs don't have any issues whatsoever. The other 50% have extreme challenges to the point where it can be as tricky to get off of as heroin. And so depending on what bucket you fall into, there's going to be some challenges. There's potential to be some challenges. Now, there's about 48 to 52, somewhere in that region, of SSRIs available, anti-anxiety medications in the market. So there's a lot of them. There's only about 4 or 5 of the 50 that have come back to be not safe for people to combine the psilocybin. For the other group, the majority, it's actually very safe to combine the two. The challenge is that the SSRI medication and the psilocybin is trying to attach to the same serotonin receptor. And so, where this works best is you begin the tapering off process safely with your doctor. Begin to kind of taper yourself off the dose of the anti-anxiety SSRI medication, and use the psilocybin as the bridge to help with the withdrawal symptoms to safely come off. And then ultimately the goal, if you wish, is to fully come off and then have the support of the microdosing and psilocybin on the other side. So safe to combine for the most part. But yeah, it can be a tricky process, and you have to be patient with yourself because it's not a one size fits all for people. There's some people that can get off of this, with a breeze. And there's other people that honestly, this is going to take some time, some grace, some patience. And, one of the things about mushrooms, as opposed to the SSRI, which is essentially, the best way to explain it is like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, dude, literally. The difference with mushrooms is mushrooms are amplifiers. And so the whole beautiful healing process of mushrooms is to delicately go to that tender place, that trauma, whatever it is that you're holding onto, let it come up to the surface so that it can be processed. And where we see the best results with microdosing, I'm going to explain it really easily. If you're into self-development, if you are in the process of just trying to become a better version of who you are today, so what that might look like for you is, it could be as simple as exercise and eating healthy. But if you're somebody that's going to therapy and working on themselves, I can tell you that a tool that could be incredibly helpful for you is microdosing. So if you're into self-development, this is a tool that would likely be something very fruitful for you to explore.
Yeah, I think that I appreciate your answer with the SSRIs, and it's a very hot topic. It's a topic that I've touched on with Dr. Ben Malcolm, the spirit pharmacist, on this show more than once, and It's the world of mental health addiction, which is the world I come from. My background's in therapy. I've been a therapist, and I've coached many people, and I've helped many people with addiction and dual diagnoses. And, having this question is one I get a lot. And so I as this renaissance is unfolding in the psychedelic space, it's like you said, your first order of business is safety. And that's mine too. It's, this podcast is here so that we can get guests on to talk about holistic healing methods that are not the norm. We know about SSRIs. We know about these things you can Google, and people get it every time you go to the doctor, they go SSRI, SSRI, SSRI. So it's like, we know about that. And so it's about looking in these other modalities, which are a positive disruptor for many people. And for many people, they're not, but there's many that can benefit for the potential. And I think that, this discussion is really important. And then providing therapy, or providing someone to co-regulate with as these things unfold, especially with psilocybin, because it's a truth serum. It's going to tell you the truth of your relationships. It's going to tell you the truth of, like you said, that trauma that's buried behind your bladder, behind your gets stored in the body keeping the score of the trauma. So having a co-regulation, a coach, a therapist, someone trained to be able to do this work with, it's so important.
Man, such an important piece, right? It's like, for me, when I'm having these conversations with somebody, this just recently happened where somebody that is a really elite coach and friend of mine, she put me on a call with her mom. And her mom was one of those people that had been on an SSRI since high school. And she's in her 50s now, and she's wanting to make this plan to come off. And until she actually had the therapy in place and the support in place, I honestly, at that phase, I was too worried to give her the medication, because you need the support systems in place first. And so if this is something that you're interested in, and by the way, I know you're American. What type of data do you have on people that are on SSRIs in the US? Do you have an idea? Is it like 1 in 7, 1 in 6? I believe it's that. But do you know
on how many people are on SSRIs?
Yeah.
1 in 7. It might be 1 in 4 now. I don't know. I mean, we could do a quick lookup, but it's like
it's a huge amount. We're talking 50, 60, 70 million people in the US alone. This information is much harder to find here in Canada. They just don't want you to know. But while you're looking, one of the tools and resources that we have that is completely free for people, if you come on our website, it's mindfulmeds.io. At the very bottom of the homepage, you can put in your name and your email address, and we will send you our microdosing guide. This is, I believe, the most comprehensive microdosing guide in the world. It's 62 pages long, and we really go into detail about SSRIs and how to use these tools safely. So there's just a snippet here, but please, if you're into the data, you're into the education, we put this resource together so that people can have it for free. Whether they're going to be a customer or not, that doesn't matter to us. But I can tell you that people that go and get educated and read this document before using the medicine have profoundly better results.
Yeah.
What did you dig up?
Yeah, so it says 1 in 8, but again, statistics, lying with statistics is easy, but it says 1 in 8. I have a hard time believing that. I think it's a little higher, but sure, it says 1 in 8 in the United States, because we're the number one consumer of prescription medication by a massive amount. That I do know. We consume 70 to 80% of all of the pharmaceutical medication in the world, the United States. So it's hard to believe it's 1 in 8, but okay, sure. But I want to comment on your guide that you have this. So I was looking at this guide. It's like a 62-page guide, and it is for a free guide. My God, it is really comprehensive. I will admit, I was like, usually you get like a 12-page or a 20-page. This thing is 62 pages. And then it not only goes through some of these things you're talking about, it goes through how to choose your dose, other functional meds you can take with, and so good work with that guide. We'll also link that too, so that people can download it, because there's no cost. You can just download it. And what a great starting tool for someone who wants to okay, I think I want to do this microdosing journey. And of course, you're in Canada. I'm actually in Costa Rica, but I'm from the United States.
Yeah.
And, here, psilocybin's everywhere. You go to the local Tico store, you go to the expat stores, you're going to have psilocybin everywhere here. Now, obviously back home, there's some places it's decriminalized. Massachusetts has different places it's decriminalized. That's where I'm from. Yep. I was living in New Hampshire. It's not decriminalized there, but you have different places like Colorado, Oregon. Yep. They have these natural medicine programs rolling out, which is exciting, but it's still mostly illegal. And Canada too, it's a kind of a gray area. Am I right about that?
Well, totally, man. I mean, this is different parts of the country. I think it's a little bit more decrimmed. So like when you look at Vancouver, for instance, right? Like, I don't know if you know a lot about Vancouver, but Vancouver essentially has its own version of Skid Row, and it's on East Hastings Street, and the opiate epidemic in Vancouver is really where the priority of trying to focus the attention of how to help that segment of people. And so you can walk downtown Vancouver and there's all sorts of dispensaries that you can literally just walk into and buy mushrooms on the street. The same way in Ontario. So on the other side of the country, that's the place. Where I am, it's not openly available like that. But you really got to think, right? Like, I mean, yeah, maybe let's touch on this, right? Like, such a big part of what we do here at Mindful Meds has to do with mental health, addiction. We make a product for ADHD. I'm not sure if you fall into that category, but I got diagnosed late. I was 35.
Sure. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, I wonder what the statistical percentages is ADHD. It's probably pretty high. So I definitely have had moments.
Yes, dude, it's enormously high. Like honestly, I think it's somewhere around 95%. Same with that addiction. If you go into a rehab facility, almost everybody in there has ADHD. So that's, what we do is we design products to try to solve, some of the big problems that exist. And, as we kind of go about the product offerings that we have, as I mentioned, it's, depression, anxiety, ADHD. And then as you go and the dose gets a bit higher of the microdose, you start to have a creative dose. So, there's a creative dose. And then on the other side of the spectrum, wildly, we work with a lot of C-suite executives, a lot of professional athletes. And so depending on where you fall in the bucket, we've got 16 different SKUs and we can pair you up with the right dose and the right nootropics and adaptogens to work with whatever it is that you're looking for.
And that guide too. So like in the guide that you guys provide, and like I said, we'll link to it to the show notes, but there's a guide there. It says choose your dose, and you have like micro, perform, connect, modern, synergy, rise, and they're all different strengths of the psilocybin. So, this is for people listening who've never done psilocybin, and I'm not talking about when you did it in the 70s partying. I'm talking about therapeutic psychedelic therapy, and this is what we're talking about too. Like, sure, you can do it recreationally, but that's not what we're talking about. It's how do I use this towards mental health, addiction, but also performance? How do I tap into my intuition? Maybe there's things coming up with my confidence, productivity, and you guys really laid that out with these different products. And it looks like the most advanced one is Voyage, but those would be higher doses. And obviously that comes with different risks and different experiences altogether that are not sub-perceptual. That's not microdosing anymore.
Totally. And honestly, man, like there is a place for all of it though. And what I found is, depending on the mood that you're in, depending on the environment that you're in, depending on the activities that you have throughout the day, maybe from Monday through Friday, you're looking for something that is completely sub-perceptual, non-intoxicating, just a very, very low dose that's going to help you get through the workday, maybe help with some anxiety and just maybe help with some brain fog and just like the flow of events. But on the weekend, you're at the beach and you're paddleboarding, or, for me, man, like I can't drink and do drugs anymore, but I still have these days that are just like highly, highly, highly stressful, man. And, you know, my brain can go to places that are super unhealthy. And my previous way of coping with huge amounts of stress was to go to the pub. I can't do that anymore. And so for me, man, when I take a bit of a higher dose, something that you are going to feel in the system, at least from a personal perspective, I can, within 45 minutes, generally speaking, get taken back to baseline where I can make better decisions and just feel more comfortable in my own skin. So that's why we have so many doses.
Can we hear about your routine now? Can we hear about your routine? So I'd love to hear what's your weekly routine, since you own a company that is providing these different medicines and functional. You have other supplements too that are non-psychedelic. So what is your weekly routine, daily routine with these functional medicines and with the medicine that's psilocybin?
Yeah. I mean, over the years, man, it seems to change all the time. You know, it just depending on where I'm at, my own personal growth. But right now, I'm in a phase where I really don't want to feel it. Like I don't want to come onto a call like this and have a light buzz in my system. And so we have a new product that I've been trialing for the last 30 days. It's called Subtle. And what's really interesting and unique about this particular product was we were looking for something that was nobody was going to feel, no matter how sensitive you are, no matter where you're at with your microdosing journey, this was a dose that you could safely take and not feel high. The superstar ingredient that we brought into this particular product is it's a nutraceutical version of saffron. And I don't know if you've seen the research on saffron right now, but there's 24 different clinical trials happening right now on saffron and their ability to compete with the SSRI medications that are on the marketplace today. And what we did on this particular product was we purchased an extraordinarily expensive ingredient. I don't think anybody in the world that I'm aware of in my industry is using it. It's more than $4,000 a kilogram, so 5x the price of psilocybin. That's the superstar ingredient in Subtle. And I can tell you in the last 30 days, it has been freaking awesome for me. And so it shifts. It kind of shifts. Like right now, I just wanted to really give this a 30-day run so I knew exactly how it was going to land in my system. And it's interesting because I haven't even, this just got onto our website days ago. So it's that new, but it was 7 months of research and development. We brought a full team of people in to figure this one out. Very, very proud of it. And I'll just share two things that happened for me on my experience with Subtle. I'm pretty new to golf. I started golfing maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but I've probably only done 30 rounds total in my whole life. And, when I go up to, put my golf ball down on the first tee, I can literally feel the eyes behind me, and it makes me super nervous that people are watching me. And if there's a lineup of people behind, man, I just kind of freeze. And what I found with the Subtle was I was no longer bothered at all with the eyes on me. And I know that just seems so simple, but for anybody that can understand that, the pressure that people feel when other people are looking, for instance, how many likes did you get on that post? That type of thing. I found just to really quiet my mind and just allow things to flow. And then last week, a friend of mine who I actually worked with in New York City, he's become a highly successful builder in the city that I'm in Calgary. And they have built this home that I had no idea. They had basically an open house party to basically try to sell this property. And my wife and I are driving to this address, and we pull up to this house, and we had no idea, but this house is worth $7 million. And what are we doing at this open house, right? That's so far out of my league, dude, that normally it was I said to my wife as we walked in, I said, let's just go in. We'll say hi to everybody. We'll do the tour and we're going to leave. And what ended up happening was we walked in, we saw some old friends, our guards went down, we had this amazing time, and we stayed till 9:30 at night until it ended. I was just shocked. So those are two just like seemingly really simple things, but anxiety free, feeling good in your own skin. So that's the dose that I have been really loving recently. Before I came on this pod,
right? That has saffron, you said? That's the magic
what's
ingredient?
the nutraceutical version of saffron? So yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to share exactly what it is because it's our secret sauce right now.
Sure.
But it's an incredible ingredient. There has been 9, just on this nutraceutical version, there's been 9 clinical trials done for menopause, nervous system, adolescence, very safe to take for adolescents, and all sorts of other things. But honestly, before I got onto this, and for most podcasts that I do, I'll load up on the Lion's Mane. Have you used Lion's Mane before?
I used Lion's Mane when I started microdosing back in the very early beginning stages of my journey in 2021, 2022 with psilocybin.
Yeah. So Lion's Mane, for anybody that doesn't know, is a functional mushroom, completely legal. You can find it at your natural health food store, but it's the most studied nootropic in the entire world. And essentially what a nootropic is like, it's a product designed to help with brain functionality. And it's been studied for early onset dementia, for ADHD, but it's something when I come onto a call like this or a podcast or a big meeting, I want to have as much acuity and as little of brain fog as possible. It's amazing for brain fog. So I load up on the Lion's Mane. I take just a basic microdose, 100 milligram. And, for the most part, it puts me in a pretty good place. And that's what I like to do before a big meeting or a conversation like this. Wildly, I have access to an unlimited supply of microdoses. And you get to a point with microdosing that you just intuitively use it. I don't use it every day. In some weeks, sure. I don't even use it every week. Every couple days, depending on the activities that I have, I'll reach for potentially a microdose, sometimes just the functional side of things. But yeah, that's kind of the way that I navigate.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm always curious about my guests and what their routines are. I'm always fascinated by that. And the other thing too is people listening who are interested in this journey of microdosing. In your guide, you talk about the different ways you can microdose, the Fadiman's protocol, the Stamets stack. A lot of people, when they come to me and they ask, how do I get started? How do I do this? because many of those people, some are entrepreneurs, but many are coming from the addiction recovery world. So they're already like, oh my God, there's I don't want to die because if I do one, I'm going to die. There's this black and white thinking with that world, which I understand. And so having a guide, so that is included in your guide too, which is nice. But I'm curious about the company itself. So you guys are based in Canada. You guys can ship in Canada, but you can't. Can you ship internationally? Or you can't ship to the States because it's not legal yet?
Yeah. So when I say we have 16 SKUs, we've got 8 microdosing SKUs and 8 totally legal functional SKUs.
Sure.
And so the legal products you can order, we've designed some of them to mimic a microdose without any psilocybin. So we have a product, for instance, called Happy Days that is just an amazing product, super uplifting and calming on the nervous system that we can ship worldwide. But if you don't mind, Jesse, let me just touch on the addiction side of things because, this is your community. This is also my community. And then we'll head to wrap it up pretty quick, I'm sure. But, one of the things for me that was really important was getting involved in something that people were not going to get hooked on. And, very quickly, I got fascinated with the science and the research around mushrooms. So they are actually anti-addictive. So they are not, there is no possibility of physically becoming dependent using microdosing or mushrooms. And I'll just explain really quickly why that is. So in one of the big studies, Michael Pollan wrote about this in his book, How to Change Your Mind. They reference a rat study that was done, and they put all these rats in a cage, and one dripper was full of cocaine water, and the other dripper was full of psilocybin water. And the rats that went up to the cocaine would just keep on drinking the cocaine until they died. And the ones that walked up to the psilocybin took it once and they never ever returned to that drip again. And so it's completely non-addictive. If you and I, Jesse, on a Friday night did 3.5 grams of mushrooms, and then we did it again on the Saturday, on the Friday, we're probably going to transcend and have, this prolific experience. But on the Saturday, if we did that 3.5 grams again the next day, there would just be changes in the colors, and the music might pop a little bit more. And, it might be fun and there might be some laughter, but you don't have this. It's like a watered down version of what happened on the Friday. And then if we did it again on a Sunday, you know what happens? If we did it 3 days in a row, nothing happens. And so, the more you take with this, the less it works. You have to use it on a protocol. You have to take breaks. You have to reset the tolerance for it to work. The safety profile of mushrooms, I'm sure you've gotten into this in your podcast before, but honestly, guys, one of the biggest studies that have ever been done on mushrooms on drugs in the history of time. We'll refer to this also. It's in our microdosing guide for anybody that wants to see it. Mm-hmm. But they looked at the top kind of 16 drugs in the world. This was a study done in Europe, and then they replicated it in North America. Jesse, what do you think the most harmful drug in the world is?
Alcohol.
Dude, alcohol. And it's not even fucking close. There's 3 million people a year that are dying from alcohol-related injuries. And I was pretty close to being one of them. So that is the most dangerous drug in the entire world. And it's the most readily available. All of us know an alcoholic. Most of us drink. But it's the most destructive, not only for your own personal health, but for the community of people around you. And at number 0 on all the drugs, and I'm saying drugs with quotes because we consider this a medicine, but in the study, it's a drug study. Number 0. No one in the history of time has ever overdosed on mushrooms. And so I'm really proud of those two things. Non-addictive, incredibly safe.
Yeah, the safest drug in existence, psilocybin. And, it's amazing that in 2025, how slow it's taken for this to become available at your CVS pharmacy and then maybe to prescribe. But it makes sense. There's a lock and a stronghold on, big pharma, compounding pharmacies getting access to this because of the legality from the FDA. So obviously we're seeing ibogaine now in Texas start to move through to get passed to access to veterans and first responders. So we're seeing things move, but yeah, we're way behind, especially with the number of suicides that happen today, not just in the veteran community, but overall. We need more options. And that's why I wanted to bring you on too. When we met, I was like, we have to start moving the needle. And what you're doing is giving people access to a medicine that can start to change the game. And of course, this is not medical advice. You can do your own research. You can read the books. You can find psychedelic psychiatrists that support psychedelics. You can find psychologists, therapists. There's great companies that have integration. I know on your website, it talks about coaching. So there's listen to this podcast. We're 73 episodes in. I mean, I've had at least 10 conversations, about this topic. And it's so important. So I'm really grateful that you exist and you're brave to stand up during a time that's really challenging to stand up with a medicine like psilocybin, where there's a lot of regulatory red tape. So, thank you for doing that. And also just your life path, right? Your purpose, you're living your purpose. You saw the destruction and devastation and you're doing something about it. So thank you, brother, for doing what you're doing.
Man. And honestly, I just want to send that right back to you. Thank you for the work that you're doing, the incredible conversations that you're bringing to the table, the ones that really matter. You're doing amazing work, man. I'm new to it. I've listened to a few and I'm hooked. So I'm going to keep going, man. But thank you for giving me the platform. I feel like this is going to evolve in something even greater. I have no idea where it's going to go, but there's so much more we can talk about, man. So maybe we'll just if you're open to it, well, it's your pod. We can keep going, but I'm assuming, why don't we just close it off here and maybe I come back for a 2.0.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, that's really the point of having this. It's like a flow of consciousness. The podcast, it just keeps flowing, and then we love bringing people back. So we'll bring you back on, of course, and we'll talk about where the state of psilocybin is and the legalities, and as it's literally changing overnight. It's moving pretty fast. It's You could say it's moving slow, but it's also moving fast. And I think to see a company like yours be successful is really exciting. And I definitely want to bring you back, and we can check in with, hey, any new studies emerge, new products that are out. And because you don't just sell microdoses, like you said, you sell functional supplements that like lion's mane, cordyceps, all these things that are really, we're seeing more studies emerge with that. And I think you do maca root and different things on your website. So definitely check out Mindful Meds. We'll link it in the show notes, but definitely keep doing what you're doing. And like you said, we'll see what emerges with us and what conversations we can have, because I live in Costa Rica. It's available everywhere here, but I want to see access for people, especially friends that I had in the recovery community who are they're severely depressed, on the low, and they're not knowing what to do next. And it's really, I'm standing here like talking about this, and there's so many ways to integrate and integration guides to support it. So thank you for what you're doing and fighting the good fight, brother. And this.
Thank you, brother. So grateful to be here. Excited for round 2. And yeah, man, I have a huge feeling that this is just the beginning. The universe brought us together for something big, I think.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. We'll bring you back on, man. Thank you so much. And love the painting behind you, of course, too.
Thank you, man. Well, thank you so much, brother. I won't get into the details on that, but it's a friend of mine from high school.
Round 2.
Round two, baby. Yeah, absolutely. Have a great weekend ahead, man. And I hope to see you soon.
All right, you too, brother. Thank you for checking out Entrepreneurs of Recovery podcast. We are so appreciative that you are here. Make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. Leave a review on iTunes and Spotify so more people can find the show. Once again, thank you so much. We have great episodes and content come out in the future. Thank you for being here. Have a blessed day.